Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking care of our player information, or the player data. Now, last time we showed how to write the script to make coins appear and disappear from the view as the player touched them. So it's time to be able to associate that coin touch with the specific player. Now remember, in most Roblox games we have multiple players running around in the same map at the same time. So we need to know who touched the coin so that they can get credit for that. To do this, we are going to create a special Lua tool called a module. A module is a collection of data and scripts or functions that can be called by other scripts. While Lua does not have a true object-oriented focus, this approximates some object-oriented programming practices into it. So while not truly object-oriented, Lua can give us some approximations of object-oriented programming with the module toolset. So to get started, we need to go over to ServerStorage. Now remember, last time we used the server script service to create our coin script. This time we're going to create our module in the ServerStorage, and that's where the storage of the player data is going to happen over on the server. So we're going to go there, and we need to create a module script, and you can see that's the second object there. So we'll click on that, and that takes us back into the scripting area. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to rename this module script, and we're going to call it instead player data. Now let's get started. Now, part of our requirements is we do need to call our module that we've just created the same name as our what we've called the file itself, the Lua file. So you can get around that in some instances, but it's not recommended. So let's call this player data, and it's going to return player data when we're done calling it. Now up here at the top, we've set local player data equal to curly brackets, left and right curly brackets. In Lua, that means it is creating an empty table. Now, table is one of the most flexible tools in Lua scripting that is available to us. Other programming languages have data types, they have arrays. Tables give us all of that. Because Lua, by its very nature, is an untyped language, undata typed language, we have the same capability inside of our tables, but it's untyped, so we can put a string next to a number, next to another table. We've got a lot of flexibility with this. We've got player data, and it is creating the table. So let's begin by setting some basic information for the program. So player data dot coin key name, and so this becomes a attribute of player data. So coin key name is equal to coins. Okay, let's create another table. We're going to use local again. And this one's going to have a lowercase p for player data. So this is a different variable from the uppercase p of player data. Lowercase player data is actually going to contain the information associated with the player. So there'll be player data, but it's capital P, lowercase p. And we'll set that to a curly bracket. And this is all going to be contained inside of a table. To begin with, I'm going to comment this section out, because if I don't comment it out at the very beginning, when we go to run it, it's going to give us an error. And we can remove our comment code block very easily by removing the dashes and the square brackets. So double dash, double square brackets means that this is a commented out code bracket. Everything between the two left brackets and the two right brackets is considered a comment until we remove it. And we're going to create a variable called user ID, lowercase u, and we're going to set it as a type of string, and it's going to be equal to its own table. So tables within tables within tables, one of the beautiful things about Lua. And the user data is going to include the word coins, or the information type for coins. Now this creates as I said, tables with tables. The player data includes the user data or user ID, and that user ID will include the information for the number of coins that have been created. Coin amount, and that will be a number. Remember, Lua does not distinguish between integers and double precision to begin with. We can force it to, but by default, it's just a number. So it's happy to be called just a number. So there we go. We've got our player data set up. My puppy making a lot of racket. And let's go on to the next variable. So we need a default player data. And again, this will be set equal to a table. And this information will contain the player data, coin name. Oh, I did that wrong earlier. Name. I need to fix it up here first. Inconsistent use there. Okay. And right black bracket equals 0. So they're going, by default, this is the default player data. If they have not collected any coins yet, or have an amount of 0, or this has not been initialized for the player, it will we'll set it up to call the default player data, which will assign the player data's coin key name to 0, which will initialize the whole thing for it. So nice way to get things started. Now we need a couple of functions in here that we can call from our main routine that will be calling and using everything that's stored in our module. The first one's going to be a local function, and that's going to return or get our data for the specific player. And that'll include a local data. I know our naming gets real monotonous here, but data is data, unless he's on Star Trek. So we'll get our player data, and we want to convert this to a string and pass it the player user ID. Or, and this is one of the cool things about our Lua language, we can use the keyword or. If this player data is nil or null, it will automatically default to our default player data, and the data will be assigned either the current user ID or the default player data. Makes life so much easier. We don't get all kinds of problems that way. So then our player data, and this is the lowercase p, to string, player user data, or user ID, is set equal to data. So that will pass the information in. Now what did that just do? Our player data that we created up here is going to assign to the player user ID the data. So we get our user ID, it is a string, it's getting the amount, whatever data is stored. By default, that's going to be 0 for the coin key name. And that's all that we've done, is we've just simply set everything up, and everything then gets set up correctly in the Roblox server to keep track of that player's data. There we go. So that is a function that can now be called by other routines in our scripts. Next, we need to have the ability to get the value, the player's key value, what their information is. So function, and notice that this does not have the keyword local associated with it. So this can now be called by another routine. The local get data is local to the module. Without the keyword local, this can be called from another routine that's not in the module. And so it would say player data get value, and that will pass it the information. And to make sure that that happens easier, we will say player data, capital P, get value. And it's going to receive the player and the key. So the player number and the key information that needs to be passed to it. Then we're going to return the get data, player, and the key. So player data get value is calling get data that is local. So our external function passes to an internal function. And then we also want an update. So if the player picks up a coin, we want to be able to say, hey, they've got a new value for the amount of coins that they've collected. So we need a function for that. And again, this is going to be a player data. And we're going to update value and pass it the player, the key, and the new value. And the key being our coins, the amount of coins that they've collected. Local data equals get data player. So again, we are calling, we're again calling our internal function. Notice that we're using this multiple times. It just makes life so much easier. Our old value equals data key, and our new value equals update function old value. And then we'll set our data key equal to the new value and return it. And that's it. This function is finished. Awesome. We're just zipping right through this. So that's our first module that will be called. Okay, now let's add the ability to show what's happening with our coin collection on the screen. And we're going to do that with a leaderboard. So back here in my ServerStorage, I'm going to click the plus sign and add another module script. And let's rename that leaderboard. Now, you might not have noticed this before, but you've got tabs of everything we've been working on over here at the side. We've got our island, our coin script, our player data, and your leaderboard. So you can swap back and forth between the different tabs in the windows really easily. So we're going to need a local, and we're going to call it leaderboard, since this is another module. And it helps if you use an equal sign and curly brackets. There we go. And that tells it again that leaderboard is going to be a table of information. It's going to store all kinds of information in it. Let's make that a little bit bigger in our view. So just as before, we're going to create a couple of functions that are going to be called within the module. That means they're not accessible from outside the module. The first one is we need to set up the leaderboard itself. So we're going to create a local function and call it setup leaderboard. And we'll pass it the player information, who the current player is. And then local leader stats, all lowercase, is equal to a new instance of new folder, which means that every time that when this function is called, it's going to create a new folder for storing the leader stats. Now, leader stats is a reserved word in Roblox, meaning that it can only be used for showing the leader stats. It automatically will store the information for the character in a folder that's created on the server to keep track of that information. Then let's do leader stats dot name. And it is called leader stats. Again, it's reserved word. We got to call it that. That should be in quotation. And you should spell it correctly. And then leader stats parent will be set equal to the player. So under the player, we will be storing the leader stats information. And that's basically what we're telling it here. And then we'll return leader stats. So the calling function will get back where the leader stats information is stored at. Okay, let's create another function. This one is going to be setting up the stats themselves. So we'll call it setup stat, because we wouldn't want to do anything, terribly original there. And we're going to pass it the leader stats that has already been created. You can ignore the prompts there. And then we're going to what stat we're updating. So how many coins are collected, number of times the character has, what's happening inside the game, any kind of stat that you want to keep track of. And so we'll do a local stat. I should never have given the squeaky toy to my puppy. Instance, initialize the value, and all of this is correct. So our local stat, except we don't need two ints. Our local stat creates a new instance, and we're going to name it initial value. The stat.name is stat name. Stat.value is initially going to be set at 0, and its parent is going to be under leader stats. So leader stats or setup leaderboard has to be created first, so that leader stats is created, which is stored under the player, and then the individual stats will be stored under the leader stats, which makes complete sense. I mean, where else are you going to store the stats? Under the leader stats. That just makes complete sense, right? And let's then do a public function, which means it can be called from another routine, and it's going to be called leaderboard.setStat. And we're going to pass it the player, the stat name, and the value that we want to have changed, or what the new value is. And we'll have a local variable for leader stats, which will call the information from leader stats, the information that's stored there. So leader stats is going to be equal to our player, find the first child with the name leader stats. If not leader stats, then we got a problem. Then we need to initialize the setup. So setup leaderboard player and end. Good. Let's make sure this is correct. Yes, it is. Okay, so then if leader stats already exists when leaderboard is called, then we just simply pull the information back in. If it does not already exist, then we call the setup leaderboard, which we created up here. Now, the next thing that the routine does when we call leaderboard is it checks for, are the stats there? So we check and see, find the first child with the stat name that we're looking for. If that stat does not exist, then we tell it to call the setup stat routine, passing it the leader stats and the stat name, and it creates that first initial value. Then we can set that stat value equal to value. So just a real simple way to get everything ready to go. That's going great. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is return the leaderboard at the end of, and you gotta spell it correctly. There we go. That's why autocomplete can be a real help if you don't ignore it. Hopefully that's clear. If not, please ask me in the comments and I'll be happy to clarify these two modules that we've done, the player data and the leaderboard. It can be a little confusing the first few times you use a module. Just understand that basically we've created functions and routines that are not stored in our main program, our coin script, but can be called by something like coin script. Now that we have our modules in place, we're ready to update coins to make good use of that. First thing we need to do in coins is be able to tell coins where to look for those modules, and that's in our server storage. There we go. And let's add our modules. Okay, go moving right along. Now we need to set up a couple of new variables to keep track of some of the features that we've added. let's add our, we're going to add our static variables. We've already got cooldown in there. Let's add a coin key name. It is convention that we always fully capitalize anything that is going to be stored as a static. In other words, it should not be changed during the gameplay. And we're going to pull the coin key name static variable from our player data that we already created. There we go. We've got our cooldown, and then let's add a variable to keep track of how many points the player gets when they pick up a coin. Then we need our update player coins, which is going to receive the player and an update function, create the variable new coin amount, and that will be set equal to the value coming back from player data, update value, and we're passing it the player, the coin key name, and an update function. And then we'll also call to the leaderboard module our set stat, where we'll update the number of coins that the player has collected. All right, one more thing to add, I think, and we should be ready to go. So instead of printing out that the player has picked up a coin to the log file, let's instead call update player coins from above, the function we just created, player, and we're going to pass it the function that includes the old coin amount. And then let's have old coin amount equal to old coin amount plus 1, or no, not plus 1, or 0. So it's going to be initialized either to the old amount or to the value of 0 if it's the first time it's being called. And then we'll return, pass back the old coin amount plus our coin amount to add. There we go. And I think our program should be done. Let's test it. No errors. That's always a good thing. There we go. So we got stuff happening now. Nope, we got an error. Player data on... So in the module player data 29, we got an error. So let's take a look at that. 29, right there. And there's the problem. This should not be new value. We're passing it a function and expecting to have that function right there available to us. So let's change that to update function. There we go. And press play. And there we go. We're now collecting coins. Well done. So next time we'll make the water dangerous for the player to fall into and keep developing our game. Good job. We're making real progress here.